Thursday is Valentine's Day. Just a PSA for anyone who needs a reminder, hint, hint, anyone who hasn't been in any store seeing all of the hearts and cupids and candies and flowers and all that good stuff. It makes you think about love. So I'm curious out here in this room full of love, how many here have been married more than 10 years? Okay, how many more than 20?
Dawn, hold your hand up.
How many more than 30? Still have them. Wow, 40? 50? How many are married more than 60? Wow. 65? Okay, we got one last. Melissa, how many years?
68.
68? Oh, wow. Y'all could write a book, huh? Do you still remember how the proposal went? Yeah, most of you do? Who proposed to who? Nowadays, I've noticed there seems to be a lot of trends where when people propose, they try to get a friend, like hiding in the bushes to take pictures or videotape it. Or they get really involved and plan a whole mob dance. Or on this last fall, if you watch the Emmys, during an acceptance speech, someone proposed. Fortunately, she said yes. It would have been really awkward otherwise. But sometimes I think simple is good. I love to remember the story I was told of how my great-grandfather approached my great-grandmother after worship in their small country church in North Dakota. And even though they hadn't been courting, they hadn't been dating, he said, "Lena, do you want to keep working for those Danes, or do you want to come and be the mistress on a Norwegian farm?" How romantic. I guess she decided to give her 2 weeks' notice because I'm here. It was definitely simple. You also have to make sure to not propose on accident. I have a friend who was sitting with his girlfriend one day and just thinking aloud said, "I think it would be a good idea if we get married." He was an external processor. This idea had just come into his mind. He was in no means ready to pop the question. But that's how she took it. And they've been married more than 40 years now. But I think one of my favorite stories is one my grandmother told of how she was visiting my grandfather in Chicago. And one day he sat her down on his lap and told her that that September they were going back to North Dakota to get married. He didn't ask any question. Like a true mechanical engineering mind, he just decided. I guess she decided that was a good idea because they were happily married for over 50 years. That last one reminds me of how Jesus proposes. You see, in our gospel today, Jesus has been gaining popularity. People are listening to him more and more with his teaching and his preaching and want to be around him because reports are that he also does healings. And where we meet up with him, by the way, the batteries are dead, where we meet up with him in Luke's gospel today, Jesus is down by the lakeshore. And he ends up commandeering Simon Peter's boat to use as a stage from which to speak to the crowds who are gathered there. Now I'm guessing that Simon Peter was listening to the authority Jesus was speaking with while he was cleaning his nets and cleaning up after a long night. And so even though he probably thought it was a pretty foolish idea to put these nets back in the water when he had just cleaned them up, and even though he was probably really exhausted after a long night not catching anything, and even though he probably figured he had more expertise in fishing than this carpenter turned preacher, out of respect, Simon Peter did as Jesus told him. And when Simon Peter saw the fish just climbing on top of each other to get in those nets, he realized there's something different about this Jesus guy. He's not just a teacher and preacher. He must be sent by God. And Simon Peter knew that he was not worthy to be in Jesus' presence. He felt that he was not righteous enough or good enough or clean enough for Jesus even to be on his boat. And that is when Jesus proposes. Oh, he doesn't get down on his knee with a diamond ring or orchestrate a mob dance. Jesus' style is much more like my grandfather's. He simply told Simon Peter how it was going to be from now on. Jesus decided that Simon Peter was going to start catching people, that he would be a fisher of humans. End of discussion. No questions needed. And Simon Peter never need wonder anymore if he was worthy, because Jesus chose him. And so now, Simon Peter was in a committed relationship with the Christ, with God come to be with us. And he would leave everything behind. All of those fish that had just jumped into his net meant nothing anymore. His life was changed. He would follow. He would go on adventures and have journeys that he never imagined. Simon Peter, this fisherman, would be Jesus' disciple. And Jesus would be his rabbi. And in time, Simon Peter would come to realize that Jesus was his everything. I think this is how Jesus also comes to us. We can be just hanging out, working, minding our own business, and Jesus comes along and sits us down on his lap or climbs on our boat and decides that we are his and he is ours. He chooses us. He wants to be in relationship with us. And our lives will never be the same again if we follow. Because of that relationship, our faith grows and deepens. Because of that relationship, we are called and gathered and enlightened and made holy. And others will know about this relationship, not by the ring on our finger or a cross around our neck, but they'll know about it by our love. Just as Jesus called Simon Peter to follow by catching people, Jesus calls us in our baptism to love by proclaiming the good news in word and deed, by caring for others and the world God has made, by working for justice and peace. Not because we have to, not out of fear that he will break up with us if we don't, but because it's who we are now. Because it's how we respond to his love for us. Because we are connected. We heard in that first lesson about how Isaiah even wondered if he was worthy. And God assured him that God chose him. He's worthy. We heard Paul write to the Corinthians about how he even doubted if he belonged there because of his past. But he knew that he was chosen. And in Luke's gospel, we hear the good news that we are chosen. That we are made good enough because Jesus says we are good enough. That Jesus has a job for us to do that no one can do so well as us. That we are loved. No matter our past, no matter our present, always. And that we have been sealed by the Holy Spirit and marked by the cross of Christ forever. On Sunday mornings, we remember how Jesus proposes at the font through the water and the word. And how Jesus proposes to us at the table through the bread and the wine. Jesus vows to be with us always. What do we say? I do. I will. Will we follow when he calls us by name? Amen.